Hello, Mr. Scarlo here. It's day 2 of my Festive uploads. For me, it is the 18th of December, just after 8 PM. I was actually taking part of the watch along by Emily Cook of Dr. Who Lockdown, so if you haven't done any of them, that's amazing. This one was perfect coincidence on the timing, and so I took part in that. So yeah, today's episode review is Doctor Who Series 3 Episode X, or Zero if you're American. I'm going to keep on doing that. The Runaway Bride. This one is weird, this episode, because this is the first episode of New Who to have anyone who wasn't a main cast member in the title sequence, Catherine Tate. And also, she's the only person to have appeared in an episode prior, been in one episode, and then become a full-time companion. That has never happened for anyone. So what I'm going to do is do a basic plot line of the episode, and then I'm going to review the characters, and then I'm going to rank the video. Sorry about the last one because I forgot to rank the video, the episode, but I did put it down in the description, so if you do look at that, you'll have seen it. And if you haven't, I'll just tell you my on my latest review up in the corner somewhere. It was 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. So yeah, in this episode we have Donna Noble. She's at a wedding. She's walking up the aisle and bam, she's gone. Yellow light, she's gone. She's in the TARDIS. If you have watched Doomsday, she's already in the TARDIS. So this is taking place. This little segment of her at the wedding is just between the literally occurring right at the same time, parallel to the Doctor, as when he was talking to Rose in Battle of Pain by the TARDIS. Anyway, so yeah, and then the Doctor tries to find out how on earth she got in TARDIS, and he tries to take her back to the church so she can get married, but it's not letting the TARDIS take it. Yeah. So they try and get Donna back to a wedding, but they fail. So yeah. And then they try and get a taxi. Donna eventually gets into a taxi which has a roboform. So from the last review I did, the roboforms are the Santa disguised things. I don't know if I ever said that. Disguised as Santas. So they're in this episode as well. So that's a sort of link between the two. And also, the roboform drives the car, clamps on a wheel, and tries to take Donna to some sort of secret base, probably the secret base that was later on in the episode. And the Doctor gets the TARDIS. Why am I doing that? Doctor gets the TARDIS, gets Donna out of the situation, and then they go to the reception, and then Donna has yada da da da. The Doctor tries to hide the things because they don't know what he's chasing them by. So he puts this ring on her called the biodumper. The Doctor finds out it's some. I better say this. There's a Doctor reference in here, and it is mentioned later on heavily, but it's a minor one here. Like if you've watched series 2, like in the last episode, I reviewed, that was the second reference to Torchwood. But yeah. So there was, they end up, and they go to the H.C. Clements where Donna works, and Lance comes along, and then they go to the unknown floor on the building where Torchwood Institute used to work there, and then they talk to the Arachnos. The Arachnos comes, twist. Lance is actually working with the Arachnos. Basically, the next thing that happens is that the Doctor gets TARDIS around him. They go find out what the heck's happening by going back down to the creation of the Earth, find out the Arachnos are the centre of the Earth, and they need living human particles to the Arachnos to return, because Empress of the Arachnos is apparently the only one left. While they do that, Lance gets all the human particles put into him. And basically the next thing, when they come back, Lance dies as it's like the kidneys cut, and he was being rooted on it, so he dies, he falls into the thing, and then they start to, and basically there's not much left of the episode. What happens next is that the Doctor appears dressed as a roboform, and it's more common look, with just like a black, sort of like a black hoodie, but more of like, not a hoodie, more like a silk sort of coat or something like that, and the little mask. But anyway, what he does is he tells the Empress of the Arachnos where he's from, because Donna assumes he's from Mars, but he isn't. When he says Gallifrey, she's sort of pissed at that because the Time Lords of Ancient, they defeated the Arachnos and murdered them. She wasn't happy about that, and the Doctor gave her a warning, and he killed them all, and they escaped. And that was, they drink the Thames because they were underneath the Thames, and that is pretty much the episode. Right, so that took quick on a bit of summary on this one than I did last week. It's the noise in the background, it's one of my sisters using the hairdryer, sorry. So on to the characters, the Doctor, what would I say? I said about him, he was grief-stricken after, I've done this again, don't know why I didn't have that with me, my notes. He was grief-stricken after losing Rose, but is still adamant on saving Donna, because he doesn't know what the full idea is. He only knows that Donna is probably going to die, but of course he has to save the world. And then his look on his face when he is killing the Arachnos is cold and empty, which I mentioned sort of last week. But this time the Doctor knows who he is now. It's like, if you've ever seen it, it's the point where the Doctor has rain all over his face, and it's just like, and there's a bright yellow light behind one of his shoulders, and it's like, it does it better than me, obviously, but it's convincing. It's like what a cold-blooded killer might do, but the Doctor doesn't often kill. Like, the Doctor might have a gun or shoot things more in the classic era, less in the new era. It still happens in the new era, but not as much. But he doesn't often actually outright kill someone. The only one I can properly remember is the end of Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, when Matt Smith, actually, the missiles are still coming, but they got all the dinosaurs in the Silurian ship to safety, but Solomon's ship disembarked from that ship and got blown up by the missiles, and the Doctor lets that happen. Like, you wouldn't think the Doctor would do that. Donna Noble, she was originally annoyed by the Doctor and thought that he had captured her, but she learns about the big picture of the universe and Earth, and then what a place in that is, and how she fits on into it all. And she originally at the beginning of the episode, she says she's not a big fan of Christmas, but at the end she's more lenient to it, because she says, do you know what, Christmas dinner, she's not a big fan of it, but she's asking the Doctor to come, so that must have had an impact on her. Not many characters to talk about. Sylvia Noble, she's really concerned for her Doctor and tries to make him feel better, but ultimately makes it worse. There's not much else to say about that. Lance. Now, he's an interesting one. Sylvia Noble, she doesn't really have any impact in this episode, but in Series 4, when she is fully fleshed out among her appearances, she is a better character, especially in Turn Left. Beautiful episode. Lance, I said he tries to see the big picture, but his lack of politeness towards Donna, a woman he hates, he despises. The only reason he married her was so that, or tried to marry her, is so that, I can come on about words, he ensures that she will die from the human particles. That's the words. And means of a certain death, which sort of, and Donna even says at the end about him, it's like he deserved this, but then she said he didn't deserve it, saying it, even though there was it was promised something of seeing out the stars, and might have done terrible things. He's still a good person, just wrong place, wrong time. Empress of the Arachnos, she tries to bring back her kind, but ultimately fails when the Doctor commits genocide. And that's another point. It's not just like he's killing one person, it's genocide. He's wiping out a whole race. Like, I think the Time War is fine, because that was a war, that was actually a war going on. But the episode of Arachnos is weird. Like, I understand where he's coming from, because they're old enemies all the time, was of ancient, or the dark times, or before. So yeah, that's all my notes have, because there's not much to talk about the characters in this episode. Don't know, but I'm going to touch on a bit more on, because in a way, this was the first episode to have a new, well, technically it's the second, because Love and Monsters, but since this episode is not part of the main series, like it is attached to series 3, and I literally just seen a thing on Twitter about Russell T Davies arguing, is it series 2 or 3? And he says it's 3. I say it's series 3, not series 2. But that's not the point. This one's like an episode, like it's part of a series, but it's not the main episode of the series. It's prior to the main episodes. That's why I call it X for Christmas, or 0 for those Americans, because they don't use a dot in the thing. They use an X between this series and the episode. But this episode can focus a lot on her, even if she wasn't in series 4, and still give us enough about her, and we do, because they even say, at the wedding, it's like, she used to bite people. She didn't used to do this. She has been feisty and always will be feisty. She was in this episode, and she is in series 4. The Arachnos' plan, was it a good plan? Was there any flaws in it? She wouldn't have thought there were any flaws, because she didn't know the Doctor was coming. Like, unlike in the last episode, it was because of the Doctor the entire thing happened. That was a spontaneous thing. The Doctor's regeneration energy, that went up as well. Like, the Guinevere Space 1 probe was a part of it, but not as much. Because the Doctor wasn't part of the plan, she didn't know, Arachnos didn't know the Time Lords existed anymore, or that the Doctor even existed at all. And the plan would have been watertight if the Doctor wasn't there, or Donna wasn't there, as you see in the episode Turn Left, again. Because that deals with impacts of this new parallel universe, which branches off from this episode, sort of. There's literally, think of this episode without Donna in it. Just some random person from H.G. Clemson said that episode plays out in that universe, branches off into the events from Festive. Actually, it doesn't deal with any of the events from series 3. Oh no, it does. Episode 1, but then it just skips on to Voyage of the Damned and the early events from series 4. And that is, I think this episode that's also a good point to turn it into Turn Left. It's like they can sort of do all these weird things with it, as it is an interesting concept of new reality. Like, even though I'm not really discussing the episode of my review, but it is connected, and it is a point to bring it into the review, because it is important if I was to ever review that episode further down the line after all this Festive stuff. The writing, I think this writing, Russell's writing, is better in this episode than in the Runaway Bride. This is the Runaway Bride, the Christmas Invasion. Because in the Christmas Invasion, he had to also bring in a new Doctor. With this Doctor already being established, you don't have to deal with that stuff. It's just Donna. Donna's just a human, and not a whole companion. If it was a whole companion like Rose, that would be something, because you'd have to put that into her character narrative. But since it's just it's initially one episode for a character, you can put enough into it, and you can sort of develop the character, but it's not too much, or it's not too little. And that made it easier for him to write. And also the real performance, having them back as a sort of linking narrative, as I said earlier, from the previous episode, and actually a lot of mentions to previous episodes. Not a direct reference to Rose, but there was a mention. I was like, I'm not going based on the Major London Man, Mark. That's her response to the tortured for the bottom four of the HD Clements being under the Thames, like the Autons base being underneath the London Line Road. They mention the spaceship from Christmas Day, and they also mentioned the Battle of Canary Wharf. Like I said, there was a Torchwood mention of the guy on that guy's phone where the Doctor's looking for things. And there's another reference that when you first watch the episode, it doesn't mean anything, but when you watch other episodes of it, it was cool because they mentioned when the guy at the tank shouts at the stars, he says, Mr. Saxon says, fire at will. Mr. Saxon, as we later find out in Series 3, is Master. But in fact, this is not the first reference of Harold Saxon, or the Master, because he's not called the Master yet. First reference was actually in Love and Monsters, as I previously mentioned. I didn't mean to bring it up then, but now I have, that's good. Because when the absorber of his tick is killed, or absorbed, Mr. Skinner, he's holding up a newspaper and it says Mr. Saxon leads by 63%. Mr. Saxon, that's the same Mr. Saxon as mentioned in this episode, and you see it at the end of Series 3 and at the end of the Series 4 specials. So, it's actually a quick review. Wow, managed to speed through that. Probably because I didn't have much notes, had it more compact. And so basically, what would I give this episode out of 10? I say it is better than Christmas Invasion, but it's not near the best. I'd give it a 7. 6.5 or a 7 out of 10, I'd say. Yeah. Trying to think of which one would fit me better. 6.5? Yeah, I'd say this episode was a solid 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, so it's only 0.5 better than this episode. As in, no. Do you know what? No, I'm gonna say 7. This was 7. This is 1 whole point better than the previous episode. I think I could say that. I'm gonna say 7 now. I might decide that later on in my next review, further down the line. But yeah, so that is pretty much it for me today. You'll see this whenever it comes out. So yeah, can't wait for the next one. Voyage of the Damned, coming soon. I was gonna say a date. There's no point. Thank you very much. Adios and goodbye. Mr. Scarlo out.